The golden state of Texas? Texas. For decades, it has been the undisputed symbol of the American dream. Wide open spaces, low taxes, and boundless economic opportunity. The narrative is one of explosive growth, tech booms, and conservative fiscal success. Yet, beneath the polished glass of Austin's skyscrapers and the sprawling oil fields of Houston, a silent, corrosive failure is taking root. By 2025, the state's rapid success has birthed an equally rapid crisis, a dramatic and visible surge in chronic homelessness that stands in brutal contradiction to its image of prosperity. This is not the slow decay of the Rust Belt. This is the collapse of the American dream under the weight of its own success. Prosperity's price? The housing collapse. How does the beacon of economic freedom become a landscape of sprawling tent cities? The answer lies in the unforgiving economics of the tech boom. Massive corporate relocations and an influx of high-earning professionals have driven up housing costs at a rate the working class and low-income residents cannot absorb. The gap between median income and median rent has become a chasm, pushing thousands of working Texans, teachers, service workers, veterans directly into the streets. Unlike Kensington, where the crisis is primarily driven by drug addiction, the Texas crisis is fundamentally driven by housing unaffordability and a lack of social safety net infrastructure designed for rapid demographic change. We will dissect the uncomfortable truth. Texas is a state that successfully attracts investment, but has catastrophically failed to provide basic shelter for the very workforce that powers its growth. The progressive paradox. Austin is the most acute example of the crisis. Known for its Keep Austin Weird culture and progressive politics, it has simultaneously become one of the least affordable major cities in the US. The city's initial, permissive approach to public camping, allowing encampments to grow visibly, created immediate controversy and intense political backlash. The sight of dense tent cities directly adjacent to high-rise corporate headquarters became the defining image of Austin's broken social contract. This is the progressive paradox, a commitment to human compassion that was overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the crisis and undermined by a failure to invest strategically in the housing first model before the boom arrived. The resulting political fight has led to repeated ballot measures and policy whiplash, demonstrating that even a city with humanitarian intent can be paralyzed by the speed of economic change. The policy of zero tolerance. In contrast, major centers like Dallas and Houston, operating under more conservative municipal leadership, have often deployed a zero-tolerance approach, heavily enforcing anti-camping ordinances and relying on aggressive police sweeps. While these policies may temporarily clear certain areas, they merely displace the crisis, pushing unhoused individuals into drainage tunnels, wooded areas, or industrial zones, making them invisible and exponentially more vulnerable to violence and illness. This punitive model, while satisfying the demands of businesses and homeowners for public order, fails to address the root cause of the homelessness, the lack of low-cost housing. We see a policy of denial, where the city chooses to make the problem unseen rather than unsolved, exacerbating the long-term suffering and making effective outreach nearly impossible. The result is a cycle of enforcement that is as fiscally wasteful as the incarceration model in Philadelphia, yet equally morally bankrupt. The working homeless, the unseen victims. The most damning evidence of the American dream's collapse in Texas is the rise of the working homeless individuals who hold full-time or multiple jobs but cannot afford rent. They are the visible manifestation of a system where a minimum wage, and often a median wage, is insufficient to secure basic human needs. This population often lives in cars, motels, or transitional housing, constantly battling the twin threats of job loss and eviction. Their plight directly indicts the state's economic ideology, an unrestrained capitalism that creates vast wealth at the top, while simultaneously eliminating the affordable living options necessary for the service and support structures of that economy. The Texas crisis proves that economic growth without equitable housing policy is merely a pathway to social stratification and inevitable collapse. The vicious cycle, from high rent to mental illness. For those already struggling with mental health issues, The loss of affordable housing is often the final catastrophic trigger. The financial pressure and chronic instability of homelessness exacerbate existing mental illness and substance use disorders. Unlike Kensington, where the cycle often starts with addiction, in Texas, the cycle often starts with eviction and economic trauma, which then leads to a secondary crisis of addiction and despair as coping mechanisms fail. The failure of the state to adequately fund mental health services, another hallmark of conservative fiscal policy, ensures that once an individual loses their home due to economic forces, the path back is almost impossible, solidifying the chronic nature of the Texas crisis. The necessity of housing first policy. The primary solution to the Texas homeless crisis of 2025 must be a massive, immediate investment in the housing first model, coupled with strategic zoning reform to encourage affordable density. Housing first, unlike traditional punitive models, provides permanent, subsidized housing without prerequisites like sobriety or employment. It treats housing as a stable foundation, proven to be the most effective platform from which individuals can address underlying mental health and addiction issues. The argument that Texas cannot afford this is patently false. The state cannot afford not to. The cost of emergency services and crisis management far exceeds the financial investment required to provide dignified, stable shelter. This policy shift is not a handout. It is a critical infrastructure investment to maintain the integrity of the state's massive, growing economy. A reckoning for the American dream. The image of Texas, the land of unlimited opportunity, is being permanently scarred by the sight of its citizens living and dying in the streets. The 2025 crisis is a final, brutal reckoning for the economic ideology that celebrates wealth creation while ignoring social responsibility. The collapse of the American dream is visible in the distance between the glass skyscraper and the tent at its base. The time for denial and punitive policy is over. Texas must choose. Will it sustain the myth of prosperity or invest in the human foundation required to make that prosperity real for everyone? Share this documentary to expose the social costs of economic growth. Subscribe to America's Uncomfortable Truth as we continue to investigate the systemic flaws that define our nation's challenges.